Most posts on here come from the USA. This one is from Scotland. To start, none of my family really believe in the paranormal, myself included really, but no one can explain this road. My maternal family live in the northeast of Scotland, in a tiny wee village on a peninsula called the Black Isle. Now, the village itself has some creepy places. There's the Pirate's Graveyard, so named because most of the 17th century gravestones are emblazoned with a skull and crossbones. There's McFarquhar's Bay, a site where smugglers used to flash lights as though they were a lighthouse and lead ships to wreck themselves on the rocks. The smugglers would then use caves situated around the village to hide their caches. Lastly, there's the old stables, situated halfway up a steep hill, just after the Pirate's Graveyard. Now, the only reason I find this place creepy is probably because when I was a kid, they had some exceptionally strange art exhibitions on the lawn. If you've ever seen the reflective sculptures set in Scottish woodlands, you know the kind of nope we're talking about. Some of these places have a creepy feeling when you're there, but just the same creepy feeling as when you're telling scary stories in the woods around a campfire. That's not the same for Ethi Road. There are 2 roads into the village, one along the coast and another through some beautiful woodland known as the Fairy Glen. Different Fairy Glen than the one on the Isle of Skye. Apparently, we are not always inventive with names. I adore the Fairy Glen. Most of my childhood memories are walking through the woods here. There's a waterfall at the end of the short hike where we'd bring a picnic and leave some food for the fairies. A rule my grandfather always has was that if you drive past the Fairy Glen, you had to say hello and salute the fairies. I digress. Back to the roads. So, if you take the road to the village past the Fairy Glen, there's a fork, the Ethi Road, a picturesque, winding road taking you past farmsteads and rugged views, even a beach where you can find fossils of ammonites and other Jurassic specimens. We drive it often in the daytime, but never, ever at night. For the record, I have never been on this road at night. Out of curiosity, I've peeked at the fork where you can divert, but my family's stories always sends chills down my spine. I see the sign for the Ethi Road at night, even in the Scottish summer when it's light until 11 p.m., and I can't make the turn. The first story is from my grandpa, a stout Glaswegian atheist. He drove the road at night 3 times as a change of scenery from the usual drive. The first, he saw a beautiful light, orbs shining over the trees. Said he'd rarely felt as calm as he did when he saw them. The next time, he excused as just being tired. A young girl appeared in the back seat of the car. He drove her a few miles down the road and dropped her off at the path up to one of the farms. Once he dropped her off, he felt a sense of dread and sped all the way home. The dread ceased as soon as he got off Ethi Road. The last time he ever drove the road was one autumn. It can get dark quickly in Scotland, and he found himself in pitch black, on the road, with a pale face staring at him through the window. It stayed with him until he turned back onto the main road to the village. My aunt and Mum both had similar experiences with the face at different points in time. Both had boyfriends that thought the road was a load of nonsense. All involved had a face and figure follow them to the end of the road. One of my uncles saw the same lights as my grandfather. Another uncle saw a hitchhiker dressed in a posh suit, but wearing clown shoes. As my uncle slowed, the hitchhiker turned. It gave an inhuman grin, literally from ear to ear. It had no eyes. My uncle sped all the way home. When you search this road online, there's no evidence of anything spooky, just information about the cool fossils you can find. If you're ever in that neck of the woods, Feel free to check it out at night and get back to me, because I'll never drive it. I want to share this experience that happened to me around 15 years ago, when I started study in a town away from my parents' home. There was one man, let's call him Tony, which was a good friend of my father, helped him at work sometimes. Hence, I hung out with them usually. When I was 17, I moved to a bigger city to start university, so I traveled every 2 months to visit my parents for long weekends or vacations. After my second year away, this friend, Tony, died from alcohol abuse. My father told me on a phone call how it happened, or at least how he heard it happened. Around 2 months later, on Dia de Muertos, Day of the Death, here in Mexico, I went to visit my parents, also to go and visit the tombs of the family as the tradition goes. And at this point, I literally forgot about Tony's death. The apparition comes around because I didn't catch the bus that arrives during the day to my parents' hometown, so I was forced to take one that arrives there around 2 a.m. It is quite a small town, so since I didn't find any taxi near the bus station, I decided to walk home. Around 5 blocks away from the house, I had to pass on a bridge where people say that a decapitated donkey spirit scares people during the night. I was a bit scared, to be honest, but then, suddenly this friend, Tony, reached me on his bike. I didn't mention that he always moved on a bike, and asked me if I was just arriving from university. Maybe because I was originally thinking about the decapitated donkey, I completely forgot about the fact that Tony was supposed to be dead. So I started to talk to him also, and we walked, passing the bridge and a couple more blocks, for around 4 or 5 minutes, talking about the school, the food in the other city, and stuff like that. Just 1 block away from my parents' house, he just told me, "Okay, I have to go check on some things over here," pointing at another direction. "But keep safe. Say hello to your father for me." We said goodbye, and then I got home. Since it was early morning, I walked directly into my room and waited to the next day to go and see my parents. It wasn't until the next morning, when I was just about to tell my father about Tony, that I remembered that he was already dead. At that moment, I didn't tell my parents, but a bit later into the day, my father told me that he saw me arriving. He asked me if I was drunk or something, because he saw me talking to nobody. So then I told him. I think it was some kind of company on that bridge that I was afraid of, because of the stories, and also because of that scare from the donkey story. I didn't even pay attention to the fact that my company was someone I already knew was dead. It is kind of funny for me, and actually never felt afraid of that moment. So thanks to that old friend that was there with me, even after death.
During my time at university, I had a part-time job at a huge Bavarian company. The building had 8 floors and a quadratic shape, with a big lobby hall in the center of the building. It was actually hundreds of years old, but completely renovated. I worked once or twice a week, mainly on weekends. Now here's the interesting part. I worked in night shifts, and my job was basically to walk around the whole building twice a night. While walking through the hallways, I just had to watch for stuff people might forget when they rush into weekends. Open doors, open windows, or light switches still on. Nothing out of the ordinary. The payment was also good. In fact, I was kind of surprised how good the payment was, because obviously I didn't have to do much in those 8 hours. My girlfriend and her other friends mentioned that the payment is just fair, as I had to walk around a huge building at night completely alone. They always mentioned how they would never do this. Occasionally my girlfriend would visit me to bring me some meals, as the sinister feeling in this building liked to do and play mind tricks with them. I never had problems with just being alone. I was neither paranoid or believed in paranormal occurrences. Just studied throughout the night and did my 2 walks. This was until one night in September 2018. The shift started like any other. Got the keys from the janitor and started studying. After my first walk through the building, between 3:55 and 4:05 a.m., the whole electronic system throughout the building resets, which I find really odd at my first shift, but grew to ignore it after some months. The janitor would explain the reasoning after I asked. The reset leads to the light sources turning on and off throughout the entire building. Systematically, but still chaotic. I sat at the front desk, not even paying attention to it. And suddenly, a certain noise reached me. One of the 2 elevator doors in the first floor opened itself and closed itself, and then opened itself again. Malfunction, I thought, then went back to reading boring scientific papers. After 20 minutes it happened again, but this time, the light in the elevator switched off, which seemed really weird. At this point, I started to feel a little bit alarmed. When I moved into the elevator, the door closed behind me. I panicked and tried to get out of the elevator, but the elevator had already started to take me to the 2nd floor, in complete darkness. When I reached the 2nd floor, the door opened and I basically fell out of the elevator door, turning around while I fell. The really sinister looking, completely dark elevator closed again and then took off to another floor. My heart was racing, and a part of me thought someone manipulated the console. But another part of me felt something else. Fear. I had goosebumps all over my body and returned to the front desk, with the plan to text my supervisor and the janitor about a technical defect of the elevator. I did this with trembling hands, when I suddenly heard another distant noise. Radio music from somewhere in the canteen. I slowly moved toward it. My smartphone light switched on. The noise came from the kitchen, and I followed it. Reaching the kitchen, I saw that the radio was playing music on one of the tables, the same one the cooks listened to while they were working. I froze. I could not breathe. During my first walk, the janitor texted me and told me to put the radio under a certain desk and switch it off, as the cooks would always store it there. I did this directly when the shift started, even texting him because I couldn't find the desk at first, after unplugging the radio itself. I turned around and sprinted through the canteen, directly to an exit, and waited outside for the last 2 hours. Luckily, I had the keys with me when someone for the day shift came. When he arrived, I got into the building with him, took my bag and left very quickly. I called myself in for the next 2 weeks. After that, I quit the job using excuses regarding my sleep cycle. To this day, I still have no idea what happened that night. My mother was a single parent with 6 very well-behaved children, 5 girls and 1 boy. My name is Brandy, and I was the youngest and very small for my age. We were all opened up to the paranormal at an early age as well. This took place in Hollywood, California in the late 60s. Mom knew her kids were all different, and she was very supportive. She would just tell us to not go around telling people because they would think our family was crazy. Looking back at life with my mother, I kind of tend to agree on so many levels. Something she always said stuck with me. People don't like what they can't understand. At the time, we were renting a downstairs duplex on Alexandria Street in Hollywood, across the street from this mean old lady. She lived in the back of the house with her windows blacked out, and would scream at kids walking or riding their bikes by. She even popped our balls if they landed in her driveway, and then she would laugh. I tried to be her friend because I loved everybody, but she just had an evil soul. One day, our mother sat us down and told us that the owner was getting a divorce, so she and her kids wanted to move back to our place, so we had to move. Mom knew that was going to be very hard financially to come up with the money for the move, but she asked us to have faith in her, so we did. My mother worked 3 jobs and worked mostly day hours, so the only time she could go looking at rentals was at night. All 6 of us would pile into this big yellow wood panel station wagon, with the suicide seat in the back, and off we would go. The adventure began into the night. Most of the time, some of the doors to the rentals were unlocked. Being in the 60s and all of us were armed with flashlights, but we had to be very quiet. The scariest time for me was when the doors were locked, so me being the smallest, my brother would help me into an open window in the dark so I could run to the door and open it for them. Now that I'm writing this, I believe that was breaking and entering. My brother and I were very sensitive, so if there was a house that made any one of us feel uncomfortable, Mama would scratch it off her list and move on. It was hard to find a house that fit all of us, especially anything my mother could afford. One day, I came home from school and was surprised to see all of our stuff was being moved to the house directly across the street, where a mean old lady lived in the back. I finally found my mother and asked her what was going on. She told me that she got a really good deal she couldn't pass up. Just stay away from that old lady, she told me. It was an old 2-story house with wood floors and a big porch that wrapped around to the side. 1 bathroom and 3 bedrooms. It used to be a 4-bedroom, but a small portion in the back was divided to accommodate another renter. That old lady. I must add that I was young, and still very small for my age. That house was much bigger than the duplex across the street. Boxes were everywhere, and there was so much commotion downstairs, my mother was understandably distracted. I asked her why she didn't wait and let me check the house for anything bad first. Not wanting to make me feel dismissed, she took both of my hands and told me that there wasn't any time. It was a good deal, and I had to take it, and that she also didn't have to use a moving truck. She told me to check it out now and report back to her if anything was wrong. Feeling very important, I went off to investigate. I went into the kitchen. Big. I went into the dining room. Fancy. Then I started up the stairs. Mom mentioned there was a bedroom big enough for all my sisters, a place for all of our toys in the hall, and a room for my brother, so I was excited to see it. The staircase was enclosed with a door at the bottom. You went up 4 steps to a landing, where it turned to the right and then proceeded up from there. I got up to the top step, when something got me. It felt like 3 cold hands quickly one after the other grabbing around my throat with such force. I tried to scream, but the grip was getting tighter. I thought my vocal cords were going to get crushed. They started forcing me backward with my back arched. I felt like I was going to fall, but they just held me there for what seemed like forever in my mind. My toes teetering on the edge of the top step. I could not move. It felt like surges of electricity throughout my body. Then they started guiding me backward down the step, fearing at any moment I was going to be thrown. I saw little spurts of my own breath coming from my nose. As they were guiding me back down the stairs, I could feel only the edge of the steps graze the tips of my toes, while I was trying to grip my foot on each step as I continued being forced down the stairs. They led me to the landing and pressed my back against the wall. It felt like 1,000 weights were pressing against my chest, still hardly touching the floor. I was starting to pass out when I heard a voice in my head say, "You are strong. Have faith." In my mind, I saw a white glowing light all around me, and I said the only word that came to my mind. The universal sound of God. They then lessened their grip ever so slightly, but it was enough for me to drop to the floor and run down to my mother. "Please, Mom, we cannot live here, please." I told her what had happened, but she said it was too late. We had no money and nowhere else to go. It wasn't long before everyone else in the family had their own experiences. We all hated that house, but we had to endure it until we could afford to move again. My brother liked to tinker, take things apart and see how they worked, if you will. He took the time to sometimes share that part of his life with me. I'd like to think that's where I got my inventor's mind and my ability to fix almost anything. He set up a workshop downstairs in the basement. I sometimes found some of my electronic toys being dissected so he could see how the mechanics worked. He then would put them all back together on that workbench. One day I was looking for one of my toys, a little furry barking dog that walked, and I suspected I knew right where to look. But I was too scared to go down into the brick-walled basement alone, so I took my trusted cat, Friska. He will protect me, I thought. I started down the stairs with my cat in my arms. I got almost to the bottom step when the lights went out. The door to the house slammed shut. Scared to death, I felt for the railing and started to run back up when I saw something. The house was on 3-foot stilts from the ground, so normally you could see the moonlight from under the house through the vents to the outside. Something moving was blocking the light out, quickly coming towards me. It almost looked like a billowing black smoke from the back of the house. Just then, my loving cat Friska hissed and clawed me for the very first time to get away. He jumped from my arms and escaped through one of the grates on the other side. I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, with my heart pounding out of my chest. I grabbed the door handle and jiggled it back and forth, thinking it was stuck. I heard a loud, long exhale behind me, followed by the smell of rotten eggs. The door finally opened, and I slammed and locked it behind me. I told my brother he said he never felt good down there, and he always kept the door locked after that. My family was very involved in the temple. We cleaned it every Saturday and helped with all the events and variety shows. Funny thing was that our family was so big it felt like we were the variety show. One such day, they were all at the temple doing something. I don't even remember exactly what. I had just arrived home from school, and someone, I think one of my sisters, was supposed to be there to greet me. Now this event happened in the hall. As you walk through the dining room into the hall, if you turn to the right and on the left, the boarded up wall to the tenant's dwelling behind us, that evil old lady, and next to her room was the main bathroom. If you turn left in the hall, you'll see my mom's room, and she and I shared together. Next to her room was the basement to upstairs, and in the middle was the door to the basement. Well, no one was home. I wasn't going to stay in that house alone, so I walked into the hall and sat on the phone bench. Anyway, earlier I saw my friend's dad's car parked across the street, so I knew my friend was home. I figured I would call him and hang out there and just wait for someone to come home. As I'm sitting there, I hear crackling coming from upstairs. It must have been one of my siblings, I thought, so I went to the bottom of the stairs, leaned in on one foot. Who's up there? The crackling stopped. Thinking they didn't hear me, I yelled again, this time calling out a few of my sister's names. Still nothing. So I sat back down on the bench and waited for them to come downstairs. It was quiet. Not a sound. Just then, to the right of me, it sounded like someone was pressing their body against the other side of the boarded up wall listening. And then a muffled, quiet, evil giggle. It felt off. Really off. The crackling noise started back up again, now coming from the top of the stairs, followed by an ear-piercing ringing in my head. Feeling uncomfortable, I picked up the phone, not taking an eye off that staircase. I dialed my friend's number, and before I could even say hello, I could see as it turned the corner of the staircase on the landing. It was huge. It didn't have a human form. There were what looked like hundreds of eyes all over. It was pulsating red to amber. Deafening sound of cracking was coming from within it, and sparks flashing all over its quote-unquote form. It was slowly gliding down the stairs coming towards me. Then I heard more prominent laughter, almost like a cackle coming from behind me. I ran. I dropped the phone and ran straight over to my friend's house until someone came home. Now, please keep in mind that we only lasted 6 months in this house. So these are all the events that I know of within that time frame, and were confirmed to me by my siblings firsthand. Here's a brief description of where this next event took place. It was on the 2nd floor. Standing at the top of the stairs, to the left towards the back of the house, was my brother's room. Inside the door to the right was a short wall at the foot of his bed. Alongside his bed was a window with some curtains. then a desk next to his bed, then an open space at the back corner near the closet. On the right of the stairs was all my sister's rooms. It was long and big, and set up as follows. Closest to the far right, then lined from right to left 4 single mattresses on the floor, next to each other with all heads to the east. Then a window. My family were all avid readers. Late one night, about 2 a.m., my sisters were all lying in their beds reading when my brother burst open the door, white as a ghost, grabbing his neck, grasping for air frantically, telling them all to go downstairs. He briefly shares his experience, then ran out of the room. At that point, he ran downstairs to wake up our mother. I witnessed this because I shared a room with her. Actually, one of the beds upstairs was supposed to be mine, but I always complained about seeing a man hanging from a rope over the staircase landing. Plus, I had way too many other experiences up there myself. The door swung open, slamming against the wall. He was standing there in a white t-shirt and pajama pants. There was no color in his face, and his neck looked like it was on fire. He said he was just falling asleep when he felt a negative presence. Something caught his eye in the back corner of the room. It was the full-body apparition of an old man. There was hate emanating from him. He started to sit up, but the man flew at him from across the room. He tried to describe it as a quick, like 1 second he was there, and the next he was on top of him, so fast the curtains and everything else in the room was affected like a big burst of wind. He grabbed his neck with both hands, gripping tight, and was choking the life out of him. He said he was nose to nose with this thing, and to this day he still can't shake the evil image of his face. My mother put a cold rag on his neck and calmed him down. We all remember dark bruises in the shape of 2 hands that stayed on his neck and chest for over a week, and he never slept upstairs again. Through the years, he never wanted to talk about this until I told him I was writing our story. Now on that night, all of my sisters brought down their bedding except one, my sister Rachel. She was headstrong and stubborn. She was the cut the crap, it's all in your head type of person, until it finally happened to her. My eldest sister Linda tried warning her that on numerous occasions she saw something dark lurking in the closet, and that one night she woke up to something pressing her down while she was sleeping. But that didn't deter her. To her, we were all dramatic and crazy. I guess Rachel thought that it was kind of cool, because she got that big room all to herself. Well, one day she was upstairs taking a nap. She never slept without the fan on, and the fan was located all the way across the room in front of that closet. The fan was round in the shape of a fat can. It was about 17 inches tall and 14 inches wide, with slats going around it about 2 inches apart, with big metal blades. My sister always slept with her arm extended out from underneath her pillow. She said that she was sound asleep, when all of a sudden she woke to her finger being sliced by one of the metal blades of the fan, and she was in extreme pain. She pulled her hand out of the fan and ran downstairs to our mother. I remembered that there was a lot of blood. My mother then wrapped her hand with gauze and papaya to eliminate scarring. We all went up to investigate. The fan was still there, but it was unplugged, so we couldn't really understand how it even got over to her. We had a shag carpet, so it couldn't have vibrated. Plus, it would have had to travel over some articles of clothing that would have stopped it, about 5 feet away from the bed, and the plug was across the room where she said it was plugged into. The cord definitely wasn't long enough to reach her bed. You know, after having that happen to you, and the fact that your entire family is now sleeping downstairs together in the living room, and the fact that she saw the fan cut her and it was unplugged, wouldn't that make you want to say uncle and join them downstairs in the living room? Nope, not her. She stayed sleeping up there for about a month until she was forced to believe us. By this time, she had made her room her own. She took 2 of the mattresses and put them on top of each other, and put them long ways underneath the window. She told me that she was in the beginning stages of a dream state, when she was fully awakened by a pressure on her chest. It felt dark and evil. She couldn't move. All these things were racing through her head when she remembered what our minister told her when we were in the council about this house. He told her to try to communicate with it, asking if it would follow her spirit guide into the light. So as she did, the pressure started to get worse. The more love she sent, the heavier it got. She said that it felt like a cement slab crushing her body and expelling all of the air out of her. I asked her how she got out from underneath it. She told me that she prayed and said some things our minister had told us to say, and it lifted. For the rest of the time we were there, she slept in the living room with us. Living there was hell. Every chance that old lady got, she tormented me. My brother and I both saw her through her screen door, with some dolls that looked like us, made out of our own trash and with things stabbed into them on her coffee table. She used to watch me through her screen door while I was playing. She would stand outside her kitchen door and stare at us cooking. My sister Melanie was in the bathroom, and we heard a shuffling on the other side, so being curious children, we put our ears to the wall and heard her breathing and swallow. How long was she listening, and why? Melanie was faced with her own frightening experience in the bathroom. While she was in the shower washing her hair, she opened up her eyes and saw a face looking back at her in the shower with her. So after that, I had to sit in the bathroom with her, and I felt very selfishly justified because not 2 weeks earlier, she thought it would be so funny she took all of my art stuff and put them at the top of the stairs. So when I went up to get them, I was scared to death when I turned around to run downstairs and saw a man hanging by his neck over the landing. One day my mother gave me instructions to water the plants outside, and the water handle was outside our kitchen door. All I know is my hand was on the handle, and she just appeared behind me, almost pressing my back against with hers, and her hand over mine on the handle. I looked up at her in shock, and our eyes met. There's nothing but hate in those blue-gray piercing eyes. She screamed in my face,
"No water!"
as she dug her long nails into my little hand, and her breath smelled of old cheese. Guess my sister Charity saw this from the screen door and agreed that she was fast on top of me. Charity burst out the door and yelled at her to get away from me, or it would be the first time she beat up an old lady. The lady released my hands, leaving marks on my hand from her nails, and backed up off me. My sister then yelled at her to go home. So many things happened in that short span of 6 months. We found out that the man did hang himself in the stairway, and someone shot themselves in the closet upstairs. As for the lady in the back, she was a very bad alcoholic who practiced in the dark arts. My brother and I think voodoo. She blackened out all of her windows to keep the energy pleased. No one paid her any mind. All of her food and alcohol was delivered by the store, and she never had any visitors. Everyone thought she was just a crazy old lady, but we knew there was so much more to her story. I often wonder who she was before this, and what made her that way. What happened to her that was so terrible it made her want to torment others? And even worse, innocent children. Was the evil man in my brother's room connected to her in some way? I guess I'll never know. The minister told us that the house could never be truly cleansed until she was gone. Thank you for reading. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or submit it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, stalk me on Instagram, and you can stalk me on Facebook. All of these links are below. A huge shout out to Lady Nopeingham for coming on and helping me with this episode. Extremely talented narrator, so if you haven't yet, make for sure you go check out her channel and sub as well. I would greatly appreciate it, and I know she would too. No idea what I'm going to do next, but I'll probably figure it out. I think it's just going to be a huge compilation of everything, what I talked about before, where I was going to do literally everything, you know, from Let's Not Meet, Creepy Encounters, regardless of the theme. It's just going to be one big giant. I think I'm going to make this one like maybe close to an hour long for Sunday, and I'll start working on that this week and have it out on Sunday, so be on the lookout for that. I think that's it, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Jensen, you got something to say too?
Say cheers.
Cheers.